Mental noise. Why most minds are always exposed. The world doesn't overwhelm you, your unfiltered mind does. Most people believe stress comes from external pressure, from deadlines, from noise, from constant demands. But the real source of mental exhaustion is not what happens around you. It is what you allow to live inside you. Every notification, every opinion, every interruption enters your awareness without resistance. Thoughts stack on top of thoughts. Emotions pile up, attention fragments. The mind becomes crowded, reactive, overstimulated, and in that crowded state, clarity disappears. What most people miss is how constant stimulation quietly erodes inner control. The brain was never designed to process endless input without rest, yet modern life trains you to stay alert, responsive, emotionally available at all times. You wake up already consuming information. You fall asleep after absorbing more. There is no silence. There is no mental boundary. This creates emotional tension. Noise produces urgency. Urgency produces weakness. When your attention is constantly pulled outward, you lose the ability to remain inwardly stable. Every new stimulus demands a reaction. Every message feels important. Every interruption feels personal. The nervous system stays activated, scanning for the next demand. Over time, this becomes your default state. You live in response mode. A distracted mind is an open target, not for attack in a physical sense, but for influence. When your awareness is scattered, you become easier to manipulate emotionally. Opinions shape you. Moods infect you. Trends pull you. Other people's reactions begin to determine your internal state. This is psychological exposure. Most people don't realize they are mentally accessible to everything. They allow news to dictate mood. They allow conversations to hijack focus. They allow social noise to enter their identity. They do not guard their mental space, so anything can enter. Mental strength begins with recognizing this vulnerability. You start to notice how often your thoughts are interrupted, how quickly your focus breaks, how easily your emotional state shifts based on what you consume. These small shifts compound. A single distraction seems harmless, but repeated thousands of times, it creates a fragmented mind. A fragmented mind cannot hold presence, and without presence you lose agency. This is where the mindset shift begins. Instead of reacting to everything, you become selective. Instead of absorbing noise, you filter it. Instead of letting the world flood your awareness, you decide what deserves entry. Selective attention is power. You stop treating every stimulus as important. You stop responding to every emotional trigger. You stop giving equal weight to every external signal. You begin choosing what you allow into your mental field. This does not mean isolating yourself. It means becoming deliberate. You notice when your mind starts racing. You recognize when your body feels overstimulated. You become aware of how much information you consume, and you reduce it, not dramatically, consistently. You give yourself moments of silence. You slow your breathing when urgency appears. You pause before reacting. These small acts restore internal control. With less noise, your thinking becomes clearer. With clearer thinking, your emotional reactions soften. With softer reactions, your decisions improve. This is not discipline through force. This is discipline through awareness. You also begin to see how much of your stress came from unnecessary engagement. Arguments that didn't matter. Opinions that didn't deserve attention. Conversations that drained energy. Once you become selective, you stop feeding these loops. Your mind becomes quieter. That quiet is not emptiness. It is clarity. In clarity, you start hearing your own thoughts again. You reconnect with your internal compass. You stop being pulled in multiple directions. You regain focus. This changes your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who is constantly busy mentally. You become someone who protects their inner space. You stop reacting impulsively to every emotional input. You become someone who observes before responding. People notice this. They feel when you are no longer mentally available on demand. They sense when your attention is contained. Your presence becomes heavier. Your words become slower. Your reactions become rarer. This creates psychological gravity. You don't need to raise your voice. You don't need to compete for attention. Your calm draws it naturally. Mental noise also hides deeper discomfort. Many people stay distracted to avoid feeling. Silence forces confrontation with inner states. That is why they fill every moment with stimulation. But when you allow quiet, unresolved emotions surface, you don't run from them. You observe them. You let them move through awareness. This builds emotional resilience. You stop needing distraction to feel okay. You become comfortable with stillness. This is where mental untouchability starts forming. Not through dominance, through containment. You contain your attention. You contain your emotional reactions. You contain your energy. That containment gives you control. You stop being shaped by external chaos. You start shaping your internal world. Once you learn to guard your mental space, the world loses its ability to overwhelm you. Situations still happen, noise still exists, but it no longer enters you unchecked. You become the gatekeeper of your awareness. And when you become the gatekeeper, you stop being exposed, you stop being reactive, and you stop being mentally scattered, because your mind is no longer an open doorway for every external disturbance. Perception controls silence in a loud world. The quietest mind moves with the most precision. In a world that rewards noise, speed, and constant reaction, silence feels almost unnatural. People rush to respond. They compete for attention. They fill every gap with opinion. But beneath all of that movement is a hidden psychological law: attention follows stability, not volume. Most people don't realize how much their behavior is shaped by emotional availability. When someone reacts quickly, explains themselves often, or mirrors the chaos around them, they signal accessibility. Their inner state is visible. Their emotional door is open. Others feel free to enter. But when someone remains quiet, steady, and selective with energy, something different happens. People slow down around them. They become more cautious. They start observing instead of assuming. This is perception control, not control through force. Control through presence. What most people miss is this unseen social pattern. Humans respect what feels emotionally unavailable. When your reactions are rare, they carry weight. When your words are chosen, they feel deliberate. When your silence appears intentional, it creates curiosity. The mind does not like unanswered space, it fills it with meaning. This is psychological gravity. Instead of you chasing understanding, others move toward you mentally. They wonder what you're thinking. They study your behavior. They pay attention to subtle cues. You become the reference point without saying anything. This is the leverage point. Detachment creates gravity, not cold detachment. Emotional independence. You stop absorbing chaos. You stop matching urgency. You stop rushing to clarify. You allow situations to breathe. That breathing space changes everything. Human behavior shifts in response to regulated presence. Nervous systems sync unconsciously. The person who feels calm internally sets the emotional tone. This happens below awareness. People don't decide to mirror your composure. Their body simply responds to it. This is why calm individuals feel powerful, not because they dominate, because they regulate. Regulated presence creates authority without effort. When you walk into a tense environment grounded, others soften. When you stay quiet during emotional escalation, the room feels it. When you pause instead of reacting, the dynamic changes. You don't need to manage people. Your composure manages the atmosphere. Most people try to influence externally. They argue, they persuade, they explain. But perception control works inward first. You govern your internal state. From that stability, influence radiates naturally. This creates a mindset shift. Instead of trying to be heard, you become felt. Instead of filling silence, you allow it. Instead of reacting to emotional energy, you let it pass through awareness. You begin treating chaos as background noise. You no longer personalize urgency. You no longer absorb collective anxiety. This changes how you move through the world. You speak slower. You listen deeper. You choose responses carefully. People begin adjusting to you. They become more respectful. They become more attentive. They become more measured. Not because you demanded it. Because your presence sets the standard. Psychological leverage comes from containment. You contain your emotional reactions. You contain your attention. You contain your energy. That containment creates boundaries without words. Boundaries felt are stronger than boundaries explained. You don't announce limits. You embody them. This also reveals something important. People test emotional access. They probe reactions. They push boundaries. When they don't get immediate emotional feedback, they reassess. Some pull back. Some become curious. Some reveal insecurity. You observe. You don't engage. This gives you clarity about who respects composure and who relies on emotional chaos. You also become less predictable. Without visible emotional cues, others can't easily read you. They can't anticipate your reactions. This unpredictability increases perceived depth. People assume there is more beneath the surface. They are right, because you are no longer externally driven. You are internally aligned. This alignment sharpens perception. Without noise inside, you see more outside. You notice micro-expressions. You sense shifts in tone. You feel when conversations change direction. You read between lines. This awareness protects you. You stop getting pulled into unnecessary emotional exchanges. You stop responding to provocation. You stop explaining decisions that don't require explanation. You let actions communicate. Over time, this reshapes identity. You stop being someone who reacts to energy. You become someone who sets it. You stop chasing attention. You attract it through composure. You stop needing approval. You operate from self-command. People feel when your emotional state is not dependent on them. That independence commands respect. They realize they cannot influence you through pressure. They sense that you are not easily moved. This creates quiet authority. Not authority based on status. Authority based on stability. You don't argue your position. You hold it. You don't defend your choices. You live them. You don't prove your strength. You demonstrate it through restraint. Eventually, perception shifts completely. Others begin projecting confidence onto you. They assume control. They sense certainty. Your silence becomes meaningful. Your presence becomes grounding. And while the world stays loud, reactive, and emotionally volatile, you move differently. You filter what enters your mind. You regulate what happens inside you. You let external noise exist without letting it shape your internal state. That is when silence stops being absence and becomes strategy, when emotional independence becomes visible, and when your calm begins quietly rewriting every dynamic around you because you no longer participate in noise. You rise above it. Internal disciplines, building an untouchable core. Every distraction asks a quiet question: will impulse lead, or will awareness lead? Most people answer without realizing they're answering. A notification appears. Someone interrupts them. A thought pulls their attention away. Instantly, the mind moves. Emotion follows. Focus breaks, and just like that, control slips. This happens hundreds of times a day. People believe their problem is lack of motivation or lack of focus, but the deeper issue is lack of internal discipline. Their nervous system has been trained to respond immediately to stimulation. Every sound, every message, every emotional signal becomes a command. They obey without thinking. Internal discipline begins when you stop obeying automatically. The moment you notice the impulse to check, respond, react, or escape, and you pause, you are training yourself. That pause is not passive. It is active restraint. It is the decision to remain present instead of being pulled outward. Most people never build this muscle. They confuse discipline with harsh routines or external structure. But real discipline starts internally. It begins with how you handle sensation, the urge to speak, the desire to distract yourself, the discomfort of silence, the pressure to respond. You feel it. You don't move. That is discipline. This is why emotional control changes everything. You stop being governed by reflex. You stop letting discomfort dictate behavior. You stop allowing momentary feelings to decide long-term direction. This is the emotional control principle. Feel fully, respond selectively. You don't suppress emotion. You regulate it. You allow sensation to rise without letting it become action. This rewires your nervous system over time. Each moment of restraint teaches your body that urgency is optional. Each moment of stillness teaches your mind that clarity comes after pause. Slowly, your internal environment becomes quieter. That quiet creates strength. Mental boundaries form naturally. You separate sensation from decision. You notice emotion without becoming it. You stop identifying with every passing thought. You observe instead of react. This creates psychological transformation. You move from reactive to regulated, from scattered to centered, from externally driven to internally governed. People don't see this process, but they feel the result. Your presence changes. You no longer rush conversations. You no longer interrupt silence. You no longer chase resolution. You allow things to unfold. Others begin adjusting around you. They slow down. They explain themselves more. They become more careful with words. Meanwhile, you remain grounded. This is quiet power. Internal discipline also changes how you experience pressure. Instead of collapsing emotionally, you stabilize. Instead of panicking, you observe. Instead of escaping discomfort, you sit with it. Discomfort becomes training. You stop seeing tension as something to eliminate. You see it as something to master. Every uncomfortable moment becomes an opportunity to strengthen control. You also begin noticing how often people seek relief through reaction. They vent, they complain, they argue, they distract themselves. But relief gained through reaction is temporary. It never builds strength. It only reinforces dependency on external release. You choose differently. You allow emotion to exist without needing to express it immediately. This creates emotional independence. You stop outsourcing regulation. You stop relying on stimulation. You stop needing validation to stabilize. Your center becomes internal. This reshapes identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who is easily disturbed. You become someone who remains steady. You stop chasing emotional comfort. You prioritize composure. You stop reacting to every provocation. You become selective with energy. Selection is power. This discipline also sharpens awareness. Without emotional noise, perception becomes clearer. You see patterns. You notice behavioral shifts. You sense when situations are changing. You read people without being emotionally entangled. This awareness protects you. You don't get pulled into unnecessary conflicts. You don't engage in emotional games. You don't argue your worth. You conserve energy. That conserved energy accumulates. Over time, this becomes your default state. You don't force calm. You embody it. You don't suppress reactions. You outgrow them. You don't seek silence. You carry it with you. People begin projecting strength onto your restraint. They assume confidence. They sense depth. They feel stability. Not because you say anything. Because your nervous system no longer mirrors chaos. You also stop needing to be right. The urge to correct fades. You realize alignment matters more than agreement. You allow misunderstandings to exist temporarily. You trust that truth reveals itself through consistency. This creates dignity. You don't explain yourself into smaller versions of who you are. You don't emotionally negotiate boundaries. You don't rush to restore comfort. You hold your position quietly. Internal discipline also changes how you move through time. You become patient. You stop forcing outcomes. You allow processes to unfold. You understand that emotional urgency clouds judgment. You choose clarity over speed. This gives you advantage. While others rush decisions, you observe. While others react emotionally, you remain present. While others seek relief, you maintain alignment. Eventually, emotional discipline stops feeling like effort. It becomes identity. Your reactions slow. Your focus deepens. Your presence stabilizes. You become someone who is not easily shaken. Someone who does not borrow emotional states from environments. Someone who carries composure into every situation. And as this untouchable core strengthens, you realize that real discipline was never about controlling the world. It was about mastering your internal responses so completely that nothing outside of you determines how you think, feel, or move. Quiet mastery, existing above the noisy. Imagine moving through a crowded world without carrying its chaos inside you. Conversations escalate around you. Opinions collide. Emotions rise and fall. Yet something in you remains untouched. Not distant, not numb, simply centered. This is what quiet mastery feels like. It is not loud confidence. It is internal alignment. Most people live in reaction. They absorb the mood of rooms. They inherit stress from situations. They mirror emotional volatility without realizing it. Their nervous system is constantly responding to external signals, never settling long enough to regain control. Quiet mastery begins when you stop letting the world enter you unchecked. You realize that every emotional trigger is an invitation to react, an invitation to explain, an invitation to defend, and like any invitation, it can be declined. This is inner authority, not authority over others, authority over your internal state. When you stop reacting, power returns to you. You no longer give emotional access to every disturbance. You no longer allow other people's instability to dictate your rhythm. You decide how much energy any situation deserves. This creates long-term power. Not power based on status. Not power based on appearance. Power based on self-command. People feel this immediately. They sense that you are not easily influenced. They notice that you don't rush emotionally. They become more careful with how they approach you. Your composure becomes a boundary they instinctively respect. You don't need to announce limits. Your presence enforces them. Quiet mastery also reshapes perception. Without emotional noise clouding your mind, awareness sharpens. You see behavior clearly. You recognize patterns. You observe motives. You sense shifts in energy. You read situations without being pulled into them. Detachment turns chaos into information. Instead of asking why something affects you, you ask what it reveals. Instead of absorbing pressure, you study it. Instead of reacting emotionally, you move strategically. This gives you clarity. Clarity leads to precision. Precision leads to confidence. Confidence stabilizes presence. You become someone who does not chase emotional resolution. You allow silence. You let things remain unfinished. You stop needing immediate answers. You stop forcing closure. This patience is rare. Most people need reassurance. You become comfortable without it. Most people need validation. You stop depending on it. Most people need emotional feedback. You move forward regardless. This independence becomes visible. You walk slower. You speak less. You listen more. You choose responses carefully. People feel when your reactions are not automatic. They realize that access to your emotional world is limited. That limitation increases respect. You also stop explaining yourself. You let actions speak. You allow consistency to replace argument. You don't defend decisions. You live them. This changes power dynamics permanently. You are no longer participating in emotional tug of war. You are no longer negotiating dignity. You are no longer proving your worth. You embody it. Quiet mastery also changes your relationship with uncertainty. You stop fearing it. You allow it. You understand that discomfort does not require movement. You let things unfold without interference. This creates emotional resilience. You no longer collapse under pressure. You no longer escalate conflict. You no longer internalize chaos. You remain intact. People often mistake this for coldness. It is not cold. It is disciplined warmth. You still feel. You still care. But your feelings no longer command behavior. You choose how much of yourself enters any moment. Selection becomes your strength. You conserve energy. You preserve focus. You protect dignity. Over time, this becomes your natural posture. You no longer practice calm. You live it. You no longer try to detach. You are detached. You no longer seek control. You embody self-command. Others begin projecting strength onto your silence. They sense stability. They feel depth. They recognize that you are not emotionally available for chaos. Your presence becomes grounding. Not because you try to lead, because you remain centered. This is identity consolidation. You stop chasing mental clarity. You carry it. You stop seeking emotional stability. You become it. You stop reacting to the noise. You rise above it. And eventually, you realize something quietly profound. Mental untouchability was never about building walls against the world. It was about becoming so internally aligned that nothing outside of you has the power to disturb what lives inside of you.